Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We've got an awesome show for you this week. Joining me today is my colleague and friend over at Yahoo Finance, the senior autos reporter, Pras Subramanian. What's going on, man?
Hey, man. How are you doing? It's good to be back.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. Cool.
I mean, it's been a while.
It's been a while. We need to have you on more than yearly. It's been a minute, I guess, as the kids say, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot going on. So I know we're going to catch up here, but I'm glad to be back.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So quick rundown here. The Chevy Malibu is donezo. You maybe read about that this week. So we're going to get into that. We'll break down what it means for Chevy and for sedans. BMW says no to a pickup, but yes to a more rugged off-roader. Pras and I will bat that around. We're going to talk about what's going on with Tesla and Rivian, two of the, I think, the most talked about EV makers. And then we'll run through what we've been driving. Pras has been in some more interesting things than I have, like the 911T for starters. And I'm still in our long-term Mazda CX-90, which is starting to really grow on me in some ways, but also bug me. And we've both been driving the EV9. That's Kia's three-row SUV. It's electric, and we're going to talk about that. So with that, let's get into it. The Malibu is donezo. They are closing it. I think this is in line with just general trends in the industry. Sedans are not seeming to be what the people want, although the companies that do them, like Honda and Toyota, they seem to do them pretty well, and the car buyers seem to want to stay with them. It was Malibu this week. A couple of weeks ago, it was the Subaru Legacy. Long-running nameplate is going to be done. So I tend to think this is a broader, just indication of where the market's going. That being said, and I'd like to hear what you think, Pras, I really feel like there is still a market for sedans. And I do think this is it's cyclical. It might take like a decade, but I feel like at some point people are going to want to drive this type of vehicle again. I don't think everybody loves crossovers in all shapes and sizes, like there's some sort of power bars. So what do you think?
Yeah, Greg, we've been seeing this sort of trend for a long time now. People buying new cars, that trend of crossovers and SUVs kind of continue to climb up past 40% of all cars. And then you see the sedans sort of taking a hit. You see sports cars taking a hit, or coupes, and then you see the pickups also gaining popularity. Yeah, it's kind of like I'm doing a piece on it this weekend, or on the next few days for Yahoo Finance. It's basically about, the Malibu being dead, kind of like our news peg here. I mean, the Malibu has been around since the 60s. It's such a iconic Chevrolet nameplate. And I think for me, it was kind of sad to see it go, but I also am sort of kind of ambivalent to see it go, because I think the sedan is a good. It's been around for a while, and it's actually a good vehicle that you can actually get a lot of performance and also utility, right? Wagons too. We've seen those go away, and that's sort of in the same boat. But I think you're right. Toyota, Hyundai, they still sell a ton of sedans. There's still a market there. I know it's dwindling. Interesting point you made, though, Greg. I want to get your take on both a potential comeback for the sedan, but also B, why do you think it just sort of lost its luster here? Like, why did we become such a crossover nation is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I think crossover nation is like Starbucks nation. It's coffee, it's transportation. And I think it's just become so ubiquitous that people are not accustomed to driving slightly lower to the ground anymore, which is what a sedan gives you. I think there's that. And I think there's also just the world thinks you get more space in a crossover because, they're hatchbacks. Most of them, they are hatchbacks. They have room in the back. People just I think what they do is they have in their mind the idea of like a 1990s Ford Explorer, which, many of us grew up with, is like the ubiquitous SUV. And then they don't want to go back to a car. A sedan is like maybe what, grandpa had or something. And I mean, I'm old enough. I remember we had sedans. So it's not like it's, totally crazy here, but I think people are going to want to drive these on a daily basis in a way that you still see with like the Honda Accord, the Honda Civic, Toyota Camry. They're still very solid vehicles. And I think people are going to want to return to that. I mean, think of how big the trunks are in like what's the last time you drove like an Accord or something? You could put everything back there. And a lot of times it's a better layout than, XYZ compact crossover,
Yeah, like you talk about a Camry or Honda, you have this the trunk, right? You have this low load floor. It goes super deep. Like, can you believe how many suitcases you could put back there? It's kind of astounding. But you raise a good point there, man. It's like, number one, anecdotally, I hear people like my family members, et cetera. Oh, this car is so low, I can't see anything. They're so used to sitting up high now with these bigger cars. They're like putting them low, and they think that they're going to get hit by everything. That's one thing that I've heard, and not necessarily. I don't disagree with that, but I think you get used to whatever you're in. But secondly, you mentioned the Explorer, right? That thing was a truck, right? That was like a body on front. That thing drove like a truck, all like, almost felt like the kind of type of steering what's it called, what the Jeeps have, right? Where it's like you turn it twice before it actually moves, right? Reticular arm steering, whatever it's called. So what happened now is like these SUVs become more like cars, and people get used to them. And when BMW the XM came out, like, what the hell is that thing? It drives like a coupe, but it has like the height of a crossover. I think we've sort of become accustomed to these bigger cars that handle better. And now I think that box is open, that Pandora's box is open. We can't kind of go back to the sedan, which I still think is a great form factor.
To zoom in a little bit on the Malibu, it was the number 3 best-selling Chevrolet last year. One of our reporters discovered that when we were, reporting this yesterday. And I wasn't shocked because I think most of that is fleet, right? I mean, that's usually where that stuff goes. But, Chevy's going to be giving up some volume here, as Ford did with the Fusion. And, an observation I kind of have is like, if you look just across town from Ford and Chevy over to Dodge, well, that Charger has been going on for 2 decades now. And when they sort of relaunch it as an EV, but also with an inline 6, there's going to be a market for that because it's a unique product. It's not for everybody, but it's distinctive. And I feel like that's where Ford and Chevy are kind of giving up, space for maybe not the greatest reasons. I mean, Ford, they replaced the Focus with the Maverick, which I give them credit for. That was very creative. Try to play in that C segment there. But I don't really know what Chevy's doing other than they just keep flooding the zone with all these different crossovers. And maybe they don't think they need a sedan anymore, especially one like the Malibu.
I got one more question for you. So, back to Chevy, we're talking about that popularity of the Malibu, and they're sort of putting all their eggs in the Equinox basket, right? In terms of not just this gas-powered one, but then also the EV. And that's sort of going to be your volume potential car that's not really a sedan, but, taking up that entry level or whatever you want to call it, area in the market. But, back to the original comment, like, about is the sedan dead, and maybe it's actually not that's going to come back. Do you think it's something that's going to cater to like people that want more sports oriented or a bit more performance? Is that what we're looking at if the sedan is to make a comeback?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you look at like Mercedes with the C and the E class, and BMW with the 3 and the 5 series, and then all the different like Grand Coupes and coupes and things like that it's becoming like a luxury item. The sporty driver, the enthusiast driver, who then wants like that athletic dynamic. They don't just want like a grocery getter. They want their sedan to be something special. And actually, I think that's where Chevy could find some daylight to do that. I think they have a nice mix of sort of accessible sportiness. It's also Chevy, Americana, so they can play off of that. And I think there could be room for that. Maybe down the road, maybe it's electric. I don't really know what shape it takes. But they've got a bunch of great names, Malibu, Impala, go back the last 100 years, they've got a lot of names that they could dust this off. I wouldn't be surprised if when they do another, mid-size crossover, Malibu gets dusted off again or something. So we'll see. It's I don't know. We kind of knew this was coming. Like I will admit, we were kind of caught flat-footed when this happened. I think the Detroit News was one of the first to report it. And then like nobody else kind of did, especially in the enthusiast and financial press. It just seemed like some of the other random sites were getting it. Because literally, we had one of our editors was like, didn't they already kill the Malibu? Wait a minute, what's going on here? It's like one of those, like, when you hear about an actor who lives so long that you like forget they're not actually dead or something. And that's kind of how this car was. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the Autoblog article on right now. I'm thinking to myself, wait, my idea of the Malibu is like 2 generations ago from this one. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, what does this thing look like? So yeah, it is around. Impala, great reference there. I mean, I was thinking that could be a good EV sedan, the Impala EV or something. So we'll see, I guess.
Side note, we were doing an electric vehicle comparison test in Novi, actually. And we came out from, I think, lunch or something, a bunch of editors. And the next generation Equinox was just sitting there in like kind of camo tape. And we were like, wow, this guy really picked the wrong parking spot to put his prototype camo vehicle next to like 6 Autoblog editors. And it's like, all right, gonna give this guy a pass. In Michigan, seeing like camo cars isn't that uncommon.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh man, if this guy knew who was like basically looking at his car right now, he would probably be a little nervous, or because they try not to get caught for those spy shots that everybody likes to look at. So. All right, so that's the Malibu. Let's run through some other things. BMW is, they're going to rule out a pickup, but they're open to kind of doing something a little more rugged while being purposefully vague as far as what that might actually be. We reported the story last week. The comments are from Bernd Korber, who is BMW vice president. And originally he mentioned this to BMW blog, and they often are pretty well read in on all things BMW. I'm going to, a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, I took a position that Kia shouldn't bother to do a pickup because they showed one, I think at the China Motor Show, or there were some drawings out there. I was like, you don't need to do that. But I'm going to change my thoughts here and say BMW, I think, would not be bad to do some sort of lifestyle pickup truck vehicle. Maybe throw it in the same bucket as, say, like the Hyundai Santa Cruz, perhaps, which isn't exactly, it's not even like a Maverick. It's almost like an El Camino. But I think BMW could do this. I think Mercedes, you remember the X-Class thing they showed a few years ago, that pickup truck? I think Mercedes should have done that. I think these two companies have room to do it. But am I crazy? What do you think of this? Probably.
At first blush, I kind of was thinking when I saw the story, I was like, I didn't even think BMW would consider a pickup just based on the brand. But, I mentioned the X6, right? They'd kind of pushed the boundaries with what cars could be like, or even trucks. Why not? Why not take a pickup and reimagine it? We have like the reimagining of a pickup on the Ford Maverick side, which looks still pickup-y, but is actually not really a pickup, right? It's like an extended, like you said, one of their crossovers. And then the flip side, you mentioned Kia and even like Hyundai with the Santa Fe, right? It's a pickup in name, but it's really like a crossover car and drives like a car and has a lot of those characteristics, but has the utility of a pickup. Why couldn't BMW do that? I could see obviously with Mercedes and their G-Class, like they got that branding there where they can go anywhere. And BMW, right? More of the on-road performance, but maybe they should consider, there's a big overlanding community here. People love those off-road, rugged-looking trucks especially their SUVs. Why not kind of mix things up and sort of inject the brand with something new and potentially a pickup-like vehicle? Now that you mention it, why not make it an EV? I don't know, make it something that's that just sort of blows your brain a little bit. I could see them doing that. They've not been shy about stuff like that in the past.
Yeah, I think they're a much less conservative company than, say, Mercedes is when it comes to, products and, pushing the envelope. Also, when you look at the segment, though, to play devil's advocate to myself here, I guess, they already make a bunch of crossovers in all shapes and sizes. The easy move would be to put some jacked up tires on it, give it the big wheels, maybe some plastic cladding. I mean, you're halfway there. I mean, I'm sure they have a sketch or a prototype somewhere in Munich with this vehicle ready to go. A truck, it's a little bit more work, But I don't know. You look at just all these different things that have entered the space, from the Cybertruck to the Ineos Grenadier to Ferrari's crossover SUV thing. I don't think there's any reason to limit yourself when you're an automaker right now. Who says you can't do it? Why would you ever think you couldn't do that? And I feel like BMW is just the way their vehicles handle in that just sporty DNA, make it like a sport truck or something. That's another thing the domestics have given up on. So why not do something like that? And people would like it. I think you would sell, I bet you they'd sell 150,000 of them in America, no problem.
It's funny you mentioned Ineos, and I think they built a powertrain for that vehicle. It's like, and the Ineos is going to make a pickup like version of their truck. That which also looks like a Land Cruiser, which is mentioned in the article of the Defender. Why not leverage Ineos in that regard? And you can have a BMW partner badged kind of vehicle. Maybe make it a bit more sporty. Who knows? But I think the pieces are in place that they could do something like that. And I think you mentioned sedans earlier, right? With that being maybe a luxury niche product, right? Maybe you can kind of target that luxury pickup utility or Rivian lifestyle type person with the BMW badge. I think there's definitely a market there for that. I think we've seen more and more people, people that I know, people that I see in the press, et cetera, they really desire this adventure truck. And if BMW quality behind, BMW is a top, Consumer Reports top brand overall, right? You have a lot going there, and you can kind of, it gives you some leeway to pursue other types of vehicle segments.
They pioneered the whole sport activity coupe with those concepts 15 years ago or 20 years ago. So, all you got to do is chop off the back, kind of put a nominal bed in there, give it that kind of Ineos quartermaster vibe. I think that's what they're calling their truck, which that'd be cool. Have you driven the Ineos yet by chance?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I've been meaning to. And look, a lot of people actually ask me about that truck. And so I think there's definitely interest there.
Yeah, no, me too. It's one of our editors drove it in the UK, and then we might get some subsequent access, I think, in the spring. But it's, as far as vehicles I would just love to drive this year, it's on my short list. It really looks like a riot.
I saw it for the first time at there's a 4x4 community here in New York, believe it or not, in New York City, that has sort of meetups, and these guys have jacked up Jeeps and Land Rovers and things like that. And someone brought a Grenadier to the meet, and I got to say, man, I think it looked pretty impressive. I thought it'd be kind of, prototype looking, right? It's a first year car. Looked pretty solid, nice paint work, really what the Defender should have been like, right? That's what everyone says. On the face of it, looks of it, look great. I think that's a winner for them potentially.
I was in New York last weekend actually with the family, and I was surprised how many Wranglers I saw just rolling up and down, anywhere, Madison Avenue, and it's okay, yeah. So yeah. I definitely believe you with the off-roader and Jeep type community. So cool, man. Well, next time, maybe hopefully both of us get into the Grenadier this year or the Quartermaster, and can do another show on that, because I'm excited about that one. I think it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, look, if you guys ever do a 4x4 shootout somewhere, Novi, et cetera, whatever, up the UP, let me know. I'll fly out there for that, guaranteed.
All right, that sounds good. Let's talk the opposite of crazy off-roaders. Let's go to Tesla. I don't know should we just throw darts here about what's going on with them, where we want to pick. The sort of slightly older news is the Supercharger network, but also it sounds like they have a hiring freeze in effect, as well as they've obviously been doing rounds of layoffs. And you maybe saw this on LinkedIn. Their head of product did a really long post about basically why he's leaving the company and just, his what's going on and how it's kind of a hard climate to be, as much as he loved the work they did there. So this is kind of weird for me for a company that is still, their numbers have not been as good as they have been, but it's still not a company that's in a bad situation by any means, as far as the dollars and cents. So, I'm a little bit at a loss to try to autopsy the last probably 6 weeks of events that have come out of Tesla. I think the Supercharger network, which we've talked about on the show before, that's another weird one. Although I think that Elon Musk is sort of saying, hey, we've kind of got this where we want it. Everybody's using our plug. Everybody's agreed, signed on and talked about how great the Supercharger network is. But that's a group problem now. That's not our problem. So I kind of feel like maybe that's a sort of a smart two-step on his part to back away. Bad for the industry and society, but good for him, Tesla, which clearly is how he thinks. And then, again, the layoffs, I would just say, to sum it up, they feel kind of gratuitous to me. I think Tesla is a fairly lean and mean company. And when you do layoffs, you often see quality issues arise. So, this is a company that's already struggled with that. So, that's kind of my nickel tour of the situation. I know you're really well read in on Tesla. What do you make of what's going on over there at that shop?
So I'll start with the Supercharger stuff. When that news came out and it turned out that they had basically axed the entire division, which was mind-boggling to everyone. I mean, it was just like, I spoke to an industry source at an automaker, and he said the move was quote unquote crazy. Like they were just shocked by it. But after some digging into it, some other smart voices kind of chimed in saying, hey, kind of echoing what you said, Greg, in the sense that they put the investment in, the network's there. It's big, but obviously nowhere near where it needs to be. Other automakers are now on board. Other charging networks like EVgo are going full on NACS too, right? And the thing that one of these analysts told me was that, this is a very low margin business that takes a lot of CapEx, and the return on it is super low. Even by 2030, it's only going to account for less than like 4% of revenue and barely any profit because it just costs so much. So it was probably a loss leader for them for the longest time because they knew, hey, we need to get this charging network built up. That's why people buy our cars. They do that, and now it's Elon saying, I need to cut for whatever reason. We'll get into that later. But he's saying to himself, why do we need to keep investing in this? We can just maintain a network, maybe grow it in a more slow manner. But like Elon, again, now we go back to the part where he's so totally haphazard. He cuts everyone off to the point that a lot of the suppliers and their partners who are building out the charging network, the charging spaces, they don't have a point of contact. There's who do we talk to about we ordered this equipment? Who do we talk to about installing it and getting it on the network? A lot of confusion there. A lot of suppliers talking about how upset they are with what happened. And Elon and crew are back to like potentially, not kidding, rehiring people to bring them back to address some of these things. So why did we do that in the first place? And then, pivoting now into the broader layoffs, we're talking about engineers, people in China, service people. Again, this is stuff that you can't replace. Quality control goes down. Service levels, Tesla service already was sort of a weak spot. You start getting rid of some of these service advisors, that becomes even worse. I understand the need to sort of be lean in a time where the EV industry is maybe hitting a plateau, but it's not like Tesla wasn't making money. They still are. So these moves seem draconian to me. And then on top of all that, Greg, oh, by the way, please pass my $56 billion pay package at the shareholder meeting. So what are we doing here? We're saving money, but then we're going to give you $56 billion to the CEO. It's a head scratcher.
Yeah, no, it's obviously, it's funny for a guy who's pretty good at capturing the public's attention. He's pretty bad at having really any level of self-awareness. So, I mean, when you talk about the executive compensation, I mean, I feel like that's something that every other executive in the economy learned in like the 1980s about just how golden parachutes and like bonuses, like there's a time and a place to like do that type of thing. And there's a time and a place certainly not to. And obviously you have to articulate why you're doing that, not just give me the money. I mean, it sounds like he's saying, show me the money. So whatever, that's a whole other set of issues. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just going to be a bumpy year for Tesla. I really think it is. And I think, he did, I think, at least pay lip service to like the car world and Wall Street by saying, hey, we're going to do a lower cost model. And this is after he basically said, I'm not going to do it because I want to do robo-taxis. And the world is like, and I mean, he got criticism from everybody for this because frankly, it's a very interesting academic idea. I mean, I've driven in autonomous cars. I've ridden in them. There could be a model for them. Believe me, I don't want to like drive Fred Flintstone's car here. I think this is all good stuff. But I don't think it's definitely a pillar for your company in the near term, especially when you've had some weird is another word for saying bad financial performances recently. So you got to at least tell people, hey, we're going to do the Model 2, or at least a lower cost version of the Model Y, Model 3. And I think he sort of said what he had to say to kind of keep the wolves at bay after that, Q1 performance that, I mean, clearly he got hit from all corners on. So,
yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I would say, side note, have you driven a Model Y or a Model 3 lately?
Yeah, I mean, I've driven both recently with Hertz, believe it or not. That's another story. We won't get into that. But I I think they're great cars for fleet, right? Great cars for rentals if you're able to understand, hey, maybe if it's a 20-degree day, you need to preheat the battery, things like that. Like, and by the way, with Hertz, at least the charging experience was seamless, man. Like it's already all hooked up. So for me, I've done about 3 or 4 of them, and I found it to be extremely pleasant. Not a problem at all with those cars. I mean, they're like gadgets. So if you're into that kind of thing, like it's just so great software, right? It's really good software, and it's phone app works. Like it's just an appliance that works. But kind of going back to the robotaxi thing, we've been covering that a lot here because it's been a focus of investors. Basically, the guy is pivoting the entire company from, that Model 2 we were talking about, that cheap car. Well, that's going to be on hold at best. And Elon is going hardcore 100% into software, robotaxi, machine learning, AI driven, whatever buzzword you want to say, he's been talking about it. And that's what he's saying the buzzwords, but also they're pushing that way. And that's the gamble is can they actually solve the robotaxi puzzle, the autonomous self-driving puzzle that is going to unlock, potentially $1 trillion value, right? This is or beyond that, multiple trillions. That's the gamble that I think he's taken. He's the kind of guy that would do that. He's the kind of guy that does take gambles. But this seems like even the biggest gamble because the company, was the most valuable car maker before this stuff. And now he's saying, you know what, we're pivoting. The EV game is clearly plateaued. He's not saying that, but he's acting that way. And he's betting the farm on the robotaxi and their ability to solve this puzzle. Oh, by the way, yesterday, the DOJ is investigating them for fraud, potential probe. And then also the fact that there's another NHTSA investigation and safety of it. So there's a lot happening there, and it's a big gamble.
I think the best way I could end this, put a bow on it, is come back to Autoblog, where we have all sorts of coverage, as well as our friends at Yahoo Finance, because we put up 3-4 Tesla stories a day. I'm sure you guys do the same. And it's a never-ending fire hose of news, and so
team coverage,
team coverage. Let's talk about Rivian now, another EV maker that's actually kind of struggling. They had a bad first quarter. They lost 1.45, call it 1.5 billion in the first quarter. They still made or brought in a ton of revenue, so a little bit of a mixed quarter. I wouldn't say it's like, iceberg dead ahead. It's not a huge warning, but it's pretty not great start to the year. Right now, it seems like they're trying to find their footing. And this is where I think startups find challenges, is you try to find that steady cruising speed in between things. Like they launched the R1S, the R1T, very well-received vehicles. Then I think it was 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, they showed all this other cool stuff, the R2, the R3, all these new products, but they're not here yet. And it seems like everybody who wants an R1S or an R1T if they have one, they already have it. I personally would actually enjoy owning one. I think they're very cool vehicles. But they're kind of in this delta between the initial fizz and then the next round, that Gen 2. So, what's your read on Rivian? I think, have you talked to RJ Scaringe, at some point? He's an interesting cat. So it's a company to watch. And again, kind of a bumpy start to the year.
Yeah, we covered their earnings pretty closely this week. My sort of take on it, they grew revenue tremendously. Nice beat there from a Wall Street perspective, but a wider loss than expected too. I think they're losing almost 40,000 per vehicle at this point, which is actually better than what they were before. But I think there's some silver linings here. I think for them, 2 things. So they still they still see that by the Q4, they see a modest quote gross profit on their vehicle. So they're trending in the right direction. They did some optimizations of the plant in Normal, Illinois to make that more efficient, bring down the bill of sales. They kept saying BOM, bring the BOM down, bill of materials down. So they're talking about that. The other big thing that they mentioned was that they're moving R2 production, right, from Georgia. They're pausing that plant, trying to save some money, moving it to Normal. They say they're going to save a few billion in CapEx, several hundred million in CapEx this year alone. It'll allow them to start production of that R2 in 2026 and get that going. That's going to be their big 45K volume seller. So right now, I think the bet on the company, if you're an investor or whoever, is do they have enough time? Can they buy themselves enough time to get to 2026 for that car to come out and still be in a good footing to launch it? Because that costs a lot of money too, right? But I think the big thing is, are they going to be able to hit that gross profit metric in Q4 and then be able to sort of sustain themselves until 2026? That's the big question. That if you're a bull on Rivian, the stock's been chopped in half this year, that's what you do. But if you're just a fan and whatever, want to see what's going on, they're in a precarious spot. But I think things are trending better. But you see that massive loss, and it's hard to stomach.
Yeah, I think you really need to, if you're, frankly looking to, buy into them, you got to look at, some of the moves that Scarin just made, like consolidating operations into Normal, Illinois. I kind of think that's a good move, actually. I think their scale is small enough that you don't need two factories halfway across the country. And if you look at their volume, they just produced their 100,000th vehicle, if I could get that word out, which is not nothing. They have some staying power. I mean, that puts them up there with, I would say Tesla, as far as a company that is kind of sort of made it. I mean, Tesla has, but Rivian's entering, they're on the porch. They're right there, and I think that's where you see they've separated themselves from the herd, from companies like, Lordstown that obviously didn't make it, or Fisker that appears to be slipping below the waves, companies like that. So, I think I feel reason to be optimistic for them based on, what we've seen for their future product. I mean, that's some really cool stuff that really, I think, could play to their base and bring in new consumers, because they're smaller, likely less expensive vehicles. And they do a great job with design. That's another thing that I think Rivian really gets. And to, go back to, we were talking about Ineos, it seems like these smaller upstarts they're almost out Land Rovering Land Rover, with some of these products they're rolling out. Because I mean, they're if I were designing a vehicle, this is what I want it to look like. The new Defender, sure, it's great, it's luxurious, you'll see it at every country club in the country, but give me the Grenadier, man, or even the Wrangler, or some of these Rivians, just from a pure aesthetic perspective. So, yeah.
I was going to say, Rivian is at the top. It could be a case study for how you start a company from nothing and develop that brand. The styling in design is one thing. They made the brand all about, we're about connecting people with nature and cool tech. Look at and RJ, that's back to RJ Scarin, right? It's his vision, connecting it, making it seem like a real company from the very start, brought Amazon on, huge investment there, still partners with them. Just this week we saw the rumors of Apple potentially join a partner for whatever that may be. On the earnings call, they said, we don't comment on speculation, but they didn't knock the rumor. They didn't knock it down. So they credit them for actually making themselves be a company that it's not fly by night. They got a ton of investment, heavy design, a thoughtful approach to what they wanted to do and who they wanted to target. And look, they actually are introducing the cheaper variants of those R1 vehicles with the dual motor and kind of stripping them down as much as they can. Leasing, expanding to 36 states now, leasing. That's a big way to you get to use that tax credit. Get that out, get those products out. I think they're a success story in that regard. Like you said, 100,000 vehicles, not many. How many startup automakers have existed over the last 100 years that never lasted, never built not even 10,000 cars? They made 100,000. So that's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely going to be, I think, a story to watch as the 20s, weird as that is to say, rolls on. So the roaring 20s, right? Yeah, I know, we're already halfway through them almost. It's Gatsby-esque. All right, let's have some fun. Tell me about this 911T that you were driving. Where did you drive it? What did you do with it? Yeah.
I had it for a weekend down in Florida. Okay. So that was nice. And I'm going to be honest. I'm a big Porsche guy, right? Love Porsche. Love it. Love the brand. Okay, there goes my impartiality. But anyway, the 911T, I was sort of initially thinking to myself, seems like a lot of money for a car that's, a stripped down 911 essentially, right? With some of the nice sporty options packages. I think the car I had was figuring for $145,000. But then I drove it, and then of course what happened? It's amazing. It's got the sportier, I believe it has like the sportier shifter. It was a manual. It was in this nice shark blue color that they have now. And it just hit all the points. Like, this is the car. This is a reimagining of the 911 for the 2024, right? It's got everything you want from like a enthusiast point of view, but it's got all the modern niceties. It's quiet when you want it to be quiet. It's comfortable. Has all the tech you want. Still has 3 pedals. Lovely 7-speed, right? 7-speed shifter, right? And it was just phenomenal. And it has a 3.0 engine, the turbo engine. It's plenty of power. So if you're in the market, you have money, you want a new car, you want to buy a used car, a used 911, which I totally get. I mean, I would love to get a used 911, don't get me wrong, but if you want a brand new car and you want to still maintain some semblance of, I like to just keep it a bit sportier on the sportier side, I think you can't go wrong. You still can't go wrong with that car.
Yeah, I didn't personally drive one, but we had one in the fleet last month and did a pretty extensive road test of it. We had the bright kind of limeish green one, and I think it's really one of the sweet spots of the Porsche lineup. I think it really is one. It's not cheap, to your point, and I tend to often look at when I get in a 911 a little cynically, because I often feel like I'm a 718 like Cayman or Boxster guy. I just really love the purest layout, the driving dynamics, the steering, everything about those cars. But then I get in a 911, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, this is it. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. There is no substitute for a 911.
Dude, I mean, the flyback, the kind of the swept back kind of flyback design, I forget what they call it. It's like everyone, you could grab someone from like the middle of the nowhere and say, what is that car? That's 911, right? It's a Porsche, right? Like, it's just so, that design is so iconic. They're still able to, I mean, I'm not breaking news here, still able to like, just keep iterating that design, and it still looks phenomenal. I'm a fan of the 992 design. I know a lot of people hate it, but I think it's a reimagining in the modern way. And I'm like you, Greg. The Caymans, the boxes are like, that's like pure Porsche, right? True mid-engine design. Can turn on a dime, but we still see the 911 and say, well, that's the Porsche that I want.
Yeah. The only complaint I have about driving 911s, and it's definitely a first world problem, is I do feel like they are bigger. They're almost like, this is a weird comparison, but they remind me of like a Dodge Challenger to a Mustang, as the 911 is to a Cayman or a Boxster. And I personally, when I'm driving a Porsche, I do like that lithe feel with the good visibility, with that direct connection to through the steering wheel. So I do like that. And I do think Porsche's kind of lost a tiny bit of that in the 911, which they've traded for. It's the most sophisticated 911 ever, obviously, but it really shows that too.
Just real quick, my brother bought a 986 Boxster, right? That Gen 1.
Oh, nice.
And that thing feels tiny in a really good way. Like you feel like it's just extends out of your body. Like it's just a connection. You're just totally connected in that car. Like your body weight matters in that car. You know what I mean? Like, and it's such a different experience that I totally get it when you're like, we really dial down to what you really want out of a sports car. 911's probably a bit too big these days for that, is what it comes down to. But if you want more of the creature comforts and luxury, you can still get that with the 911. So
yeah, one of my neighbors has the 986 generation, and I always make a point of walking the dog down that side of the street and just kind of looking at it. It's in decent shape too. I'm very tempted to be like, because those prices are fairly reasonable still. Like, they are pretty reasonable. I'd like to kind of just be like, hey man, if you ever want to sell this, just give me a right of refusal here, okay? Like, it may not be the right logical decision, but I mean, to me, what would be better to drive from, say, well, we're in the north here, from, I don't know, let's be like mid-May until late September before it starts to snow again. I mean, what could be better than that thing? So,
and they're not too badly priced these days either.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the EV9. We've both driven this thing. You probably drove it more recently than I do, but I had not a notebook, but my iPhone was filled with notes on driving it because there's so much going on there. Staff at Autoblog really likes it. I mean, I think it's arguably the most ambitious thing Kia's ever done, maybe right up there with the Telluride. It's a 3-row SUV that's electric. It's a design statement. I mean, there's companies that have been around 110 years that have not done this, and they're like, boom, we're going to do it. To me, it's a moonshot. So I've been very impressed with it. There's some things I don't love about it as far as just individual parts of it, but very impressed with it. I said this before. I voted for it for North American Utility Vehicle of the Year award. To me, I got out of it. I went into the house and told my wife, boom, this thing's got my vote. It's, hands down, it was, a singular product compared to everything else that was on the ballot that year. So, but my guess is you've been in one a little bit more recently because this was actually, it was still snowy around here. So tell me, what did you do with your EV9?
So we had it, I think it was earlier in April.
Okay.
And we did, my colleague Rick Newman and I did a review of it, and I had it for a few days. And I might be a little long-winded here, but I'll try to keep it short. But the car comes out of the garage when we pick it up, and I can't believe how big this thing is, right? It is. I thought it was enormous because it's basically a Suburban, right? A Tahoe. It's a Tahoe, basically, right? In terms of footprint, maybe not as tall because they want to keep that aero profile low, but this thing is big. And like you said, there is nothing like this out on, Hummers aside, right? There's nothing out there on the full-size EV market that I can think of. Basically, we were talking about what the Defender should have been. Well, this should be what the Range Rover should be. The electric Range Rover should be this thing. It's that impressive and looks has that. And it sort of kind of harkens back to that Range Rover, right? In that sense, that boxy but sporty and almost sophisticated looks. We're not used to that with Kia. And I was talking to a Kia, one of their reps there, and he said, Kia, people think we're the bottom bucket Korean brand, but actually there's no striation with who we are as a brand. We can go from the really small Seltos or whatever to all the way up to the EV9, which ours costs $78,000, $80,000. That's luxury level pricing there, but you get a lot of money for it. We had 300 miles of range at the time we picked up the car, dual motor, luxurious inside. I thought the beautiful color with this Pacific blue color and amazing light. They do a really good job of the lighting. All the creature comforts you could ask. Although I find it weird that only the driver's seat had the seat massage, not the passenger side seat. But hey. We'll take it. We'll still take it.
So you to get the massage and make Newman, just sit in the passenger seat and,
He wasn't pleased. Although we had the other package where it had actual, some kind of, I forget what the feature was, but I think it had massaging in the back or something like that, but not the front passenger. And he wanted to do a shoot where he was in the back the whole time. It's like, no, it's not going to work from a video point of view. Get in the front. But anyway, he was impressed too. The car is, you said, it is audacious. What they did, how they were able to make this vehicle and launch it here in this country, also I think in Korea too. And there's nothing else like it, and I think it's worthy of an award-winning car.
I think right now it's the embodiment of what Kia hopes to be, their aspirations as a brand. Because you can get one for like $54,000, or you can get one. It sounds like we may have had the same vehicle. Ours was priced very similarly. There's a fair amount of play between all the North and Eastern fleets. It was that same shade of blue. It was, expensive as hell. It does take a bit of brain recalibration to think I'm driving this $74,000, $78,000 Kia. But I mean, look at how much a Tahoe costs,
Same.
So, and you're paying for the tech. And Kias and Hyundais, they will chase value all day long. They will give you all sorts of features for less money than anybody else. And they're past the point where it's like, well, you get everything, but it's kind of a cheap interior. No, it was a very nice interior. I liked, all of them, not all, but most of the materials. It was solid. And it drove pretty well too. I thought it's not easy to get a 3-row SUV to sort of sing on the road, and it was solid.
2 more points I want to make. Exactly. I didn't even mention the fact that it drove really well. And I think that, again, goes back to how are these things made? Well, the battery's low in the car, gives you better balance, better agility. Thought turning was pretty good for a car that size. And then pricing, 78, whatever $1,000. It sounds like a lot. It is a lot of money, but not when they're selling them, they're giving them incentives now, the dealerships, and you get that qualifies for the tax credit if you lease it. So you can actually lease that car for a very reasonable amount, considering the fact how much it will cost you to lease a Expedition or a Suburban or a Tahoe or even a Durango. This car can actually compete at that level from a pricing point of view, depending on how you spec it. So I think it's very impressive. The question is, and Rick kept having this question because he's kind of a bit skeptical on the whole EV transition in the sense that where am I going to charge this thing? If you can live with the charging situation in terms of you charging at home or at work, and you live in Michigan or the Northeast, you can survive on it. You'd be totally fine with it.
Yeah, it's the EV9 was one where I ran into. I was trying to charge it at a charge point location. I didn't have to charge it, but when I get a Pras car, I like to try to charge it. Why not? And man, this charge point has been, doing me wrong. I feel like 1 out of 3 times I can actually charge something there. So infrastructure is still a challenge, but that is what it is. I did actually, side note, charge our long-term Mazda CX-90 at the Ford Mobility Hub just outside of, they're rebuilding this like train station in downtown Detroit. Mm-hmm. It's going to be like a mobility hub, office, and the parking garage is already open. So that was nice. And the first 2 floors were plugs. So I pulled in there and boom, got 21 miles while I went to the NFL draft, which was actually just a really great night all around.
That's awesome.
Free charging. So the Lions draft a cornerback out of Alabama, and it was, not a bad Friday night, And
my Bears did well too that night as well.
Oh, good God. The Bears did great. The new quarterback, they got a guy to throw the ball to. They look like they're going to be, I think the Lions still win the division, but I think they could take out Green Bay for second place.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pivot too hard into a sports podcast here, but the Carolina Panthers trade is the one that keeps on gift that keeps on giving for the Bears. So very excited about that. Good value for that.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Next time you're in town, if it's football season, the Bears are in town. Hey, got to go to a game or watch a game or two. Ironically, I went to the Lions Bears game last year at Ford Field, and that was a nail biter. So. Anyways, let's talk about the Mazda before this turns into the Yahoo Sports podcast. So the CX-90 joined our long-term fleet. I've been updating, our regular podcast listeners. I could break it down like 2 things fairly quickly here. I love how it looks. It's a pretty nice interior, a little plain, but still very nice. But the transmission just kind of sucks. They're trying to do too much here. It's a plug-in hybrid, which is great, but the transmission does not shift properly. Like last night, I was taking my kid to his baseball game, and I made a pretty aggressive turn, as one does, but not one where you should be penalized with your life for it. And cars were coming at me from both sides, and I'm just like, we're going to put it to the floor. We're going to pin it here. And it's like normally at that point, you take off, life is good, you're fine. There was maybe a half a second or a beat where I'm like, it's like the transmission hesitates. The powertrain's trying to sort out what I want to do. The power comes on slowly. You hit 323 horsepower. It's like the slowest application of over 300 horsepower I've ever felt. And it's frustrating, man. So, it was the hybrid powertrain or just go with the traditional straight 6. I drove the straight 6 last November. We did a fairly long, not fairly long, but we did like a day trip in it. That engine just sings. This one, I want to recommend the plug-in hybrid version for all the reasons that you think, because it could fit. You get 26 miles of range, electric range, but it's just the execution's not there. It feels like a Gen 1 hybrid from 2010, 2015. It's not what you should be doing now. It's a pass-fail business. There's no points for trying hard. And to me, it's just kind of rough. So, otherwise, I love the thing. It is fairly fuel efficient. I was getting 25 miles per gallon, right in there with the EPA combined figure. Nothing to sneeze at. It's huge. Got golf clubs and camping chairs in the back right now. Everybody can get into it. The dog loves it, and she's a 65-pound golden retriever. It's It's a very good CX-90. This isn't quite the flavor I would go with. So,
Mazda for a kind of, we look at the big brands, it seems kind of niche these days, but I know a lot of people anecdotally drive them. And the CX-90 was asked about in our office by several people asked me about that vehicle because they love their prior Mazdas so much. And I hadn't driven and I've been wanting to drive the new CX-90. I haven't driven it yet, nor have I driven the plug-in version too. But I'd heard similar things, Greg, that it was a bit disappointing because the car looks great, lovely interior. Of course, Mazda these days, like almost near premium luxury levels of quality. And obviously we know these cars, Mazdas drive well generally. The more of that sportier feel, leaning in on more of a performance kind of vibe. But it sounds like, like you mentioned, this poor execution with the transmission. Really sad because there are people that want, like you said, we talk about people that want crossovers, right? But hey, I want one that's sportier. I want or utilities that actually I feel something when I drive it, even if it's just going to the mall. And I think Mazda was hitting that niche pretty well. And there's no coming back. I mean, you got to wait till the Gen 2 version of this to maybe get some improvements. I mean, it's not great for this is their volume car, right? They're 3-row.
Yeah, I feel like this reminds me a little bit of like when Volvo had that powertrain lineup that was turbocharged and supercharged, and it was a plug-in. It's one of those things that in theory is a good idea, but it's just in practice. It's just they're trying to do too much. And maybe I'm being too hard on the 8-speed transmission. Like it is working with a 4-cylinder, a 2.5 liter, as opposed to just the straight 6. So maybe that's the problem too. But either way, it's not my flavor of brandy. But I do like I said, it looks great. I like Mazdas. It's the sportiest 3-row SUV I've probably ever driven. The steering, I think I'll be interested to hear if you get behind the wheel of these. It's a heavy weighted Mazda steering. So that's cool, but wait till you're driving one like with 3 rows and golf clubs and camping chairs. And it's kind of weird. You don't expect that level of direct precision. It's just this weird segment, So that's our long-term update. So you are getting into the BMW X5 plug-in hybrid. And I feel like plugins can be a little controversial right now just because of, controversial maybe isn't the right word, but a lot of times you don't get the efficiency you want. We saw this with our long-term 3 Series plug-in hybrid. If you didn't charge it, the small gas tank meant instead of like going to the gas station less, you were going to the gas station more. So I'll be interested to hear, what are you looking to get out of the X5 PHEV?
So, one of the reasons why we don't test that many cars here at Yahoo Finance, but one of the reasons why we were intrigued by, in particular, the X5 plug-in was because it was Consumer Reports rated it not just one of their best cars, it was the best car that they said last year that they think overall. And of course, they named the brand BMW as the top brand for the second year in a row. So we thought, hey, hybrids are so popular these days, same with plugins. This has been named the top car from Consumer Reports. Let's get behind the wheel and see what we think. And I'm curious because I was in the XM, right? Remember that vehicle, which is basically has more of the souped up V8 version of that, right? The V8 version with the plug-in hybrid, and that was a pretty raucous powertrain. The car itself is another story, and execution-wise, it wasn't. I don't think it was that great. But I think the X5 plug-in is a bit more. It's going to be more for more people, right? It's going to be that V6 turbo V6, I believe, right, with that power, with that electric motor, kind of giving a decent, almost like 500 horsepower there with that powertrain, and I think almost close to 40 miles of electric range. And like you said, there are issues with people that don't know they have to plug them in, right? So they don't ever really get the full sort of output there. I think BMW owners might be a bit more aware of these things, and they probably even have charging at home potentially. So maybe they're getting most out of this car and getting the most from like an efficiency point of view. But it sounds like this car in its execution is an all-around winner, even for a almost $80,000 price tag. Like we said, these cars are getting pretty expensive, but you're getting a lot for your money potentially, and maybe you lease it. So we'll see. But yeah, we're excited to get into it. Of course, it's going to have that BMW level of luxury, and these days they've been knocking it out of the park. Whether you like the twin sort of widescreen format, like it's almost like a 40-inch screen that's like both your infotainment and your instrument panel. If you're cool with that, great. I think a lot of people are. We'll see how that execution goes and see how they kind of animate the sort of all-wheel drive and electric motor kind of working together. They always do thoughtful ways of showing that type of data. But yeah, excited to get into it and see what it's like. I'm sure it's going to have plenty of power. And be smooth and just kind of, hey, this is why this car is so great. We'll see.
All right. Sounds good. Well, that's all the time we have this week. I'd like to thank Pras for joining us this week. Give them a follow over at Yahoo Finance. They do great work. If you enjoy the show, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send us your Spend My Monies. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.